but there's still a lot of questions. And I think what people are talking about today is what the university knew, when they knew it, and what was their duty, if any, to come out publicly about this, even if they did not have the details. And that is what we're hearing that Michigan State is saying. They did know that there is going to be a Title IX hearing involving their head football coach. So joining me now is Matt Friedman. He's the founding partner of Tanner Friedman. He knows crisis PR. Matt, it's good to see you. Why don't you go ahead and tell me, from a PR standpoint, when this started to roll through on Sunday morning, what went through your mind?
I had to read the story twice because I'm very familiar with Brenda Tracy. Anybody who has anything to do with higher ed or college athletics or really the sexual misconduct education sphere knows who she is. And I had to read that story to make sure what I was reading was what I was really reading. And I was waiting for the university to say something because they needed to on Sunday. And they did at 5 o'clock. And I think it resulted in addition to a lot of sadness by the MSU community, it resulted in a lot of confusion. As you noted in your interview with the reporter, there are so many unanswered questions, and the press conference on Sunday late in the day really just scratched the surface.
You know better than anyone, Matt, that when you are working with companies, sometimes there are things that companies, they just can't come out and say due to what the circumstance is. And I think that, there is so much need. We want Michigan State to come out and say everything, but there are some things in terms of details and investigation-wise that they can't come out and say. But when they do have a press conference at 5 o'clock in the afternoon that day and then only take 3 questions, and the interim president doesn't take any, what does that look like to you from a PR standpoint?
Whether it is or not, it looks evasive. And it's obvious that whatever message they were trying to communicate didn't come through, because it looks like the communication staff of the university spent hours in the evening trying to background reporters on what was not addressed in the press conference. And that's a real shame. It is, in fact, a balancing act in these situations. Working with higher ed and working with Title IX in particular, as I have over the years, it's really tricky because you have the legal side of this and you have the communication side of this. And if you go too far one or the other, you end up putting the university at risk somehow. But there really needs to be a balancing act. Audiences expect to hear from leaders during tough times, during times of bad news. And when leaders don't really have much to say, it leads to that confusion that I was talking about. And now there are all these questions that are unanswered. The other thing that institutions have to remember is that how they handle it is part of the story. Years ago, it really wasn't. Years ago, it was about reporting side A and side B and trying to help an audience make sense of something. But now shows just like this one are taking a look at how it was handled. And that needs to be thought of on the front end, not just on the back end in trying to figure out where to go from here.
And I think that maybe we wouldn't even had to have had this conversation would it not be Michigan State. Would there not also still be the cloud of Larry Nassar and how the university handled that still is over the university? And look, the university is now trying to find, again, a new president, to lead the college. So, Matt, I guess, was Michigan State's hands tied in this situation? What could they have done, again, knowing full well that maybe they can't give the detail of anything, or maybe they didn't know the detail because a report was sealed until there is some kind of hearing? What could they have done, or should they have considered in this case?
First of all, if their hands were tied, explain that to your audiences. I've worked with clients on this over the years. There's something called FERPA, which is a privacy law for education. There's something called HIPAA, which is a privacy law for healthcare. And because of those laws, it's not that the institution won't say something, it's that they can't. And the imperative is on the institution to explain to their audience why they can't answer certain questions, why they can't communicate about certain things, why information is not known at certain points along the way. And I think if the university had done some of that yesterday, and they are in the education business, so they need to educate their audiences sometimes, that would have helped. And I think it's still unclear if, for example, the coach could have been suspended in July. when the university had the investigation report in hand? And if not, explain why not. And we don't know why the hearing wasn't set up until the football team's off week. Maybe that's the normal course of action for something like this. Maybe with special treatment. But unless they indicate that and explain that, we don't know, and those questions are going to be asked. And so the imperative sometimes in situations like this is to answer the questions before they're asked. And that just didn't happen here.
No, and I think it's tremendously disappointing for so many people who are watching this, and even some reporting I just saw come out in the Detroit News this morning saying half of the Board of Trustees knew that there was an investigation and half did not. And then Kenny Jacoby did make the point that there were a lot of rumors around in July and August, and other media outlets were starting to investigate things. So you know that there has been conversation, or that information was out there, even if it was supposed to be so tightly held. Let me ask you, Matt, where does Michigan State go from here? And I'm not having you give them free advice. You know, they should come find you for some crisis PR. But what should a university dealing with something like this again do going forward?
They need to figure out how much they can say. How can they push that envelope without busting it open? And then communicate internally to their vast family of employees, students, parents, alumni, donors. What do they need to know? And then communicate to the general public. I hope they're communicating with the football players, if nothing else, because what they've endured over the last 24 hours and seeing what the coach's alleged behavior has been is difficult too. Communicate as much as you can, I think, is the advice here. And that's not what we saw on Sunday, but it could be. The corner could be turned. It's not too late.
All right, Matt Friedman, founding partner of Tanner Friedman, thanks so much for really shedding a lot of light on this, and we'll continue to talk to you in the next couple of days. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Christy.